Instacart is on a mission to have you not leave the couch this basketball season, because between the pregame rituals and the postgame interviews, it can be difficult to find time for everything else. So let Instacart take care of your game day snacks or weekly restocks and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Because we hear it's bad luck to be hungry on game day. So download the Instacart app today and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply for 3 orders in 14 days. Excludes restaurants.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 90 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Man, I'm doing all right.
I like it when you're doing all right.
Doing all right. I think I got like a little cold or something coming on, you know?
Yeah, you're a little more sniffly than usual.
Okay.
Maybe you get a little bit more of that tough guy, raspy voice that you're always striving for.
A little bit.
But I like it when you're doing good. I would like it better if you said you were doing great, but I'll take all right.
I'm great, man.
All right, Gibbs, let's start out with our Patreon shout-outs. We had Julie Kremser, Keaton Highfill.
Ooh, Highfield.
Charlene Freethy.
Thank you.
Hayden Lee Bushnell. Kelly Hurst jumped up to our highest level. Molly Zink, Amanda Vieira.
Hey, Amanda Vieira.
Madeline Drake.
Hey, Madeline.
Tim Sanford. Mary Fig.
Mary Fig, like the fig leaf?
Like a Fig Newton.
Ooh, I like Fig Newtons.
Do you? I'm not a fan.
Really?
Nope.
I don't want to eat a bunch of them, but I like Fig Newtons. I'm sorry, I have to admit.
The hell would you apologize for liking Fig Newton?
I don't know. I feel like there's
It's
a group of society that is against Fig Newton eaters.
It's not against the Geneva Convention, as far as I know. You can eat Fig Newtons if you want.
They're good for my stomach, man. Right before I fly or something, I like a little Fig Newton.
So now you're taking them on a plane?
But yeah, why not? Buy them at the airport, man.
We had Christine Peterson.
Hey, Christine.
Alexandra Santana.
Santana.
Melissa Buell.
Hey, Melissa Buell.
Who I know is a criminology supporter as well. I appreciate that.
You do know that?
I do know that.
You got a lot of knowledge there.
Well, because I think I just said her name on the most recent episode of Criminology.
Well, there you go.
Regan McDonald.
You know I like the name Regan.
I know you do.
That's it.
Just a fun fact.
Just a fun fact.
Doesn't mean anything.
I like the word Regan.
Nathaniel Hobbs.
Hey, Nathaniel. Sounds like, Nathaniel Hobbs. Is that the guy that's in the movie with...
That's Roy Hobbs.
Is it Roy? Okay.
You talking about where he's the baseball player?
No.
Oh.
I'm talking about Elf.
I don't know. You always like Elf. I've seen it once or twice, but I can't tell you. Besides the fact that Will Ferrell is in it.
Freaking hilarious, man.
And Bob Newhart.
James Caan. And Bob Newhart.
Bob Newhart.
Yeah.
Plays like his elf dad or whatever.
Elf dad. Come
I
on.
don't know, whatever you want to call it.
He's elfin dad.
I don't know. I'm not an elf aficionado. When we do our movie podcast that we're thinking about doing, we will do Elf.
Yes.
So I can make fun of it as we go through. We had Madeline Hawk, Jody Missy.
Jody and Missy.
Who I know you think are two separate people.
Well, they might be. We don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure. Sam Gosling.
Hey, Sam.
Nick Ashworth. Gwen.
Just Gwen.
Just Gwen. Angela Horello.
Hello.
Marielle McFarlane. Marielle,
like in Robin Hood?
Isn't that Marianne?
Actually, I don't even know. I'm going to go with Marielle.
I don't know. And Megan Cartwright.
Hey, Megan.
And if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Haley Porter.
Haley Porter.
Longtime supporter. And we appreciate that longtime support from Haley and and all of those people that continue to support us month after month.
Yeah, I do really appreciate.
And we appreciate the new folks that have chosen to support us as well. It means a lot. And we had a lot of PayPal support too. Therese Quigley.
Hey, Therese.
Rachel Miller.
Thank you, Rachel.
Jennifer Hess came out with a sizable donation.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Deborah Pfeiffer.
Hey, Deborah.
Jason Shepley.
Hey, thanks, Jason.
Karen Washington.
Cool. Thanks, Karen.
And then Darma Jensen made a PayPal donation on behalf of her really good friend, Rachel Vaughn, who we want to wish happy birthday to.
Happy birthday, Rachel.
It's at the end of this month. All right, Gibbs. So at the time this Unsolved episode is out, we have a True Crime All the Time episode, part 2 of the Fred and Rosemary West story. And part 1 was rough, no doubt about it. Part 2 is probably even rougher.
It is rougher, for sure. No doubt about it.
Because we get into a lot more of the murders committed by Fred and Rose. And it's not just the murders, right? You know, most of the murders were sexually motivated, but they did a lot of other stuff that on its own, without the murders, you would say these are vile people. But you add in the murders and they're rough. But check that out if you haven't yet. Now let's get to this episode of Unsolved. We are talking about a case that has or is known by a couple of different names. You might see it referred to as the Hammersmith nude murders, the nude murders. It's also known as Jack the Stripper.
Yeah. Not Jack the Stripper that some of you ladies know down at, you know, the Golden Horse or the...
the Golden Horse. Gibby's trying to think of a strip club name in his head.
Yeah.
He came up with Golden Horse. Not bad. It's not bad for on the fly.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you a story before we dive into the episode.
Okay.
Doing some research on this episode, and I'm searching old newspaper articles. Hard to find, right? Jack the Stripper. Just so happens one comes up from our hometown paper, the Dayton Daily News, an article written by D.L. Stewart, kind of a guy that's been
Famous.
around forever here in Dayton. Yeah. This was back in, you know, the 60s or 70s. He was writing probably like an offbeat column, but he's talking about going to a strip club to see a guy named Jack the Stripper.
Jack the Stripper.
So this is what the research rabbit hole does to you. And of course, I'm fascinated now because it's our hometown paper. And basically the story's about, he's at a normal strip club.
Yeah.
There's women dancing. But at a certain time, out comes Jack the Stripper, a male.
Yeah.
And all the men leave. And it's like him, another guy, and two female dancers. Like literally all the patrons got up and left because a male stripper came out.
Yeah.
I got a kick out of the story. It's not what I was searching for.
Not a good business policy. You're chasing away all the guys.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the theory behind that was, but I think it was so long ago, Gibbs, that I'm not sure they had any type of all-male review back then. So I don't know if he was testing it out. I really don't know. All right, Jack the Stripper murders, obviously something much different. These are murders that occurred in London, England. And I think, you know, you talked about it with me earlier. We did Fred and Rosemary West. Obviously, we're in England for that one. You wanted to do something in England, too, as kind of a tie-in.
Yeah. And
you found this one, and as you started researching it, really got into it. Now, we're in London, and we're back 64, 65 time frame. All the victims were sex workers that were found undressed in or somewhere near the River Thames. And we talked about it. The press would call these the Jack the Stripper murders for two reasons. Number one, as a reference to Jack the Ripper. And then number two, for the fact that these women were found nude. Two earlier murders from 1959 and 1963 have been thought to be linked to the same suspect. And we're going to talk about those as well. To find Jack the Stripper, Scotland Yard would launch one of the biggest manhunts in its history. And you have to talk about England back during this time frame. Right? The city was changing, as were other parts of the world in the 60s, but England developed a reputation as a vibrant city where the strict morality from earlier years was loosening up, as it was here in the States as well, in a lot of cities during the 60s. I think Gibbs, Austin Powers.
Oh, groovy, man.
When he goes back in time to 1960s England.
Okay.
That's what I'm picturing. Not quite like that, because that's probably a caricature of what it was, but
maybe it wasn't.
Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was closer to what it was really like.
Yeah, baby.
But during the 60s in London, sex workers roamed the streets and they called themselves business girls.
Business girls.
That's what they liked to be known as.
Well, they were making money.
And it would be these business girls that Jack the Stripper, as he would be dubbed by the press, would target. So let's start off talking about the victims. And we're going to start with the first two in chronological order, even though these first two would not be connected to the man known as Jack the Stripper until much later.
Yeah, oh, of course.
Time.
Yeah.
The first victim was Elizabeth Figg. She also went by the name of Ann Phillips. And like I said, she was a business girl. I'm going to use that euphemism.
Yeah.
All throughout this episode, because from the research, that's what they called themselves.
All these girls were business girls.
That's what they like to be referred to as. Elizabeth was born on March 24th, 1938 in Cheshire, England.
I always want to say Cheshire.
I think it's Cheshire, but I'm not positive. I think most of the shires, what you want to say in America as shire,
right,
over there is more like shire.
Like sure? Like Cheshire?
Like Worcestershire.
Like, ooh.
Even though it's spelled like you would say it shire.
Like a good Worcestershire.
You had like 5 extra syllables in that
I did.
But I could be wrong. It could be Cheshire. I'm going Cheshire.
Is that next word England?
Yeah, that one I think I know.
Yeah.
England.
Or is it England?
But Elizabeth was found by the police dead on June 17th, 1959 at 5:10 in the morning at Duke Meadows on the north bank of the River Thames in London. She was 21 years old. And this area was known as a place where a lot of the business girls
would conduct business.
This is where they would bring their clients.
Their open office. Okay.
When she was found, Elizabeth's dress was torn at her waist and ripped open to expose her breast. Her underwear, black high heels, and white purse were nowhere to be found. She had marks around her neck, and the cause of death would be listed as asphyxiation due to manual strangulation, with a time of death somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. And we're going to be talking about this with a lot of the victims.
Yeah.
Asphyxiation due to manual strangulation. There are going to be a lot of similarities that you're going to hear as we talk about how these victims died.
Yep.
Elizabeth's picture was posted in the local paper, and it was recognized by her roommate and her mother. How horrible is that?
It'd be terrible, man. To pick up the paper and see your kid on it.
I mean, obviously terrible to find out that your daughter has died, but to find out in that way.
Yeah.
It's one thing for the police to knock on your door and tell you, but you're reading the Sunday paper or whatever day's paper.
At the same time everybody else is.
Yeah, you're finding out at the same time, and all of a sudden your daughter's picture is splashed on the paper. Investigators theorized that what most likely happened was that she was murdered in the suspect's car. And at the time, police theorized that Elizabeth was with a client in his car. And because of that, she took off her shoes and she removed her underwear in the backseat of the car. And then at some point, while still in the car, she was strangled. And those items that were never found were left in the car when the killer disposed of her body. One witness, a pub owner, was just across the river, and that night he saw some headlights about 12:05 a.m., and then he said he saw the lights go out and he heard a woman scream. But obviously, Gibbs, this guy's all the way across the river.
Right.
He's not going to get a look at anybody.
Right. He just hears something.
The next victim was Gwyneth Reese. She was born August 6, 1941 in Barry, Wales. And Gwyneth, like a lot of the women that we're going to talk about, went by several different names. She went by Georgette Reese, Tina Smart, Tina Dawson. She was a business girl, but she went missing on September 29th, 1963. She was 23 years old. Her body was found November 8th, 1963 in London on Townmead Road in Mortlake near a garbage disposal site. So it's essentially a garbage dump.
Yeah, for sure it is.
And it was located only about 40 yards from the River Thames and just a mile from Duke's Meadow where the first victim was found.
So he's working kind of in the same, clearly in the same vicinity.
We're going to talk about Duke's Meadows a lot. We're going to talk about the River Thames. All of these murders occurred, Gibbs, in what you would have to say is a pretty small radius.
Yeah, that's true. That's a true statement.
I don't know exactly what it is. I think I saw in some articles they mentioned like a 10-mile radius. That's not very big for the amount of murders that we're talking about.
Yeah, for the amount of murders. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Gwyneth was found naked, except she did have a stocking on her right leg, but it was pushed down all the way to her ankle.
So she had it like was on her way of taking it off. Sounds like she had them all, like her other stocking off, started taking this stocking off, got down to her ankle, and whatever happened. It didn't come off all the way.
Maybe.
Yeah, getting undressed. Or getting dressed. Could go either way, right? She could have pulled it up over her foot, got it up her ankle, and just didn't pull it all the way up yet.
Or got pushed down in the struggle. Yeah, I mean, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a stocking expert like you. I know that you've have worn them before, so with the furry.
I like the way they feel.
Nothing wrong with that. You're confident. That's why you shave your legs.
And unlike some of the other victims that we're going to talk about, Gibbs, with Gwyneth, we couldn't find a record of the cause of death. So we don't know what it was for sure. My assumption is it was most likely asphyxiation by strangulation, but we couldn't find that where an examiner or someone listed that as the official cause of death on her death certificate. So now we get to the third victim, and this is a little misleading because, as we mentioned, the first two victims would not be tied into this same killer until much later. So as the initial investigation was going on into what we're calling the third victim, they were looking at her as victim number one. And in a lot of articles, you will see her, Hannah Tailford, referred to as victim number one. But in reality, if you're connecting the first two with Jack the Stripper, which I think you have to, then she becomes victim number three. Hannah Tailford was born on August 19th, 1933, in Northumberland, England. Hannah stood just 5'2", and this is something that we're going to talk a lot about also with other victims. And it's something that a lot of people consider significant, that all of these victims were short in stature. Hannah was also a business girl, and like others, she went by a number of different names. Hannah Lynch and Ann Taylor. Hannah was found dead on February 2nd, 1964. She was 31 years old. Hannah's body was found on the shore of the River Thames near the Linden House, which was the clubhouse of the London Corinthian Sailing Club, just west of Hammersmith Bridge. Her underwear was found shoved down her throat. She had several teeth missing. she was strangled, and then drowned. Police determined that she had been missing for 10 days and that at the time of her death, she was pregnant with her third child. And by establishing the precise rise and fall of the river, police were able to calculate that Hannah's body had been thrown into the river sometime about 24 hours before she was found. And they also figured out that it was put into the water about half a mile upstream, which would put it by Duke's Meadow.
Which is significant.
It is, because, as we said, Duke's Meadow was a place where the business girls would take their client. The next victim, Irene Charlotte Lockwood, was born September 29th, 1938 in Nottinghamshire, England. She was a business girl as well. All these girls were. And again, she also went by other names, Sandra Russell, Sandra Lockhart. She was found dead at the age of 25 on April 8th, 1964. Her body was found on the shore of the Thames River in pretty much the same place where Hannah Tailford's body was found. Again, near Duke's Meadow. And just like Hannah, the police figured out that she was killed at a different location than where her body was ultimately dumped. Her official cause of death was drowning, and police discovered that she was pregnant as well. So again, Gibbs, I don't want to harp on it, but as we're going through these murders, there are so many similarities between the victims. Not only that, but there's similarities between how they were killed as well. I don't think it was very hard for police to figure out that these were all connected. For one thing, Irene was only 5 feet tall. Most of these women, 5 foot, 5'2", right around that range. Yeah, they were all petite, short, on the short end. So by this point, police realized this was most likely a serial killer, and the newspapers grabbed the stories and they ran with them. And it was at this point when the media started calling the killer Jack the Stripper. And there was one other thing that the media reported, and it was that Irene's roommate, who was also a business girl, had been bludgeoned to death just months prior. Is that a coincidence? Obviously, you and I have talked about this before. It's a dangerous line of work.
Yeah.
It always has been. It always will be.
I think it's like the most dangerous profession out there. Always, like you said, always has been, always will.
Yeah,
for
it's a very dangerous profession. So I don't know that these two murders are connected in any way, but when you talk about somebody being murdered and then you say, oh, and by the way, that person's roommate was killed just a few months before that, it's somewhat
makes you
strange.
Think about it for sure.
Sure.
Food for thought.
The next person that we need to talk about is Helen Catherine Bartholomew. She was known as Teddy to her friends. Helen was born on June 9th, 1941 in East Lothian, Scotland. She was a business girl. She was 22 years old when she was found dead on April 24th, 1964. But where her body was found was a little bit different than some of the other victims. Helen was found in an alley in Brentford near London, and police initially theorized that her body had been dumped from a car. They did determine that she died from asphyxiation by strangulation, and examiners also determined that some of her front teeth had been knocked out post-mortem.
Well, that's interesting.
They determined that she had swallowed sperm and that she also had flecks of paint on her skin. And this is huge. This is something that we're going to be talking about in later murders. It's a very big part of this case. These flecks of paint were determined to be from some type of auto paint used in the car manufacturing industry. And investigators thought, probably rightly so, Gibbs, that the paint had most likely come from the place where the killer worked. And I think that's why it's so important mean, all the details are important, but
Right.
what this allowed them to do was start looking at some local businesses, and they began focusing on those that had any type of pressurized paint spray. Investigators also started interviewing residents on the street where Helen lived, and they found a neighbor who stated that he often heard a car pick her up at 12:30 a.m. and bring her back at 4:30 a.m. Very specific times.
Yeah.
And who in the world is up at both 12:30 and 4:30
Yeah. Light sleeper.
to know that that is a regular occurrence?
I'm a light sleeper, man. I might hear it.
Really?
I might hear that car door. Hear those high heel clickety-clack, or whatever noise they make.
Can you recreate that noise again?
No, but you can with your amazing editing abilities. But no, I'm a light sleeper. I would hear.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
My wife is, she'll jump up in the middle of and then wake me up and say, I heard something. I have to go downstairs. There is nothing.
Yeah.
I literally could sleep. A tank could roll through the front of our house.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd wake up.
Well, I know when we stayed in that hotel that one night, man, I was playing all kind of stuff, man. I was doing all kind of things. You just kept on sleeping. We had a party. You didn't even know about
Okay.
it.
Because I think you need to provide some context. You just said you were doing all types of things. You
Yeah.
probably need to elaborate on that.
Yeah, the photos are out there, you know. So, but yeah, I just sleep. I'm a really light sleeper.
I just found that very strange that a person would know something normally happens at 12:30 and it also happens at 4:30 a.m.
Yeah, or maybe he liked to stalk her.
Well, that's true. I don't know.
So
Something.
yeah, the bigger thing is what was she doing in that 4 hours at the middle of the night? Well,
I assume she
Working
was
her business?
working her business.
Yeah.
Is what I assumed.
maybe that was her manager picking her up and taking her.
We're using a lot of euphemisms in this episode.
I know.
Now, the next victim was Mary Fleming. She was born on September 16th, 1933 in Clydebank, Scotland. Mary was 30 years old when she went missing on July 11th, 1964. Again, Mary was a business girl, and her nude body was found on July 14th outside Chiswick in a cul-de-sac by a chauffeur named George Hurd. Witnesses said they heard a car reversing down the street just before the body was discovered. They determined that her cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, but examiners didn't find any marks on her body that would indicate she had been involved in any type of struggle. But they did find that she also was missing teeth. She had swallowed sperm, and her body also had small flecks of paint on it.
So some, now we're getting some better clues here.
There's a lot of tie-ins.
Yeah.
And I want to play a short clip of George Hurd,
Okay.
the chauffeur that found Mary Fleming's body.
Well, I woke early this morning.
What time?
10 to 5. Looked out of the bedroom window and saw what I thought to be a tailor's dummy in the garage opposite.
Behind where we're standing now.
Yes. And, curiosity, I suppose. I went to have a look. Saw that it was the body of a naked girl. Went back indoors and quickly phoned the police.
This guy finds the body, but he's up at 10 till 5?
Yeah.
I also like the way that English people say garage. They say it garage.
Garage. It's out in the garage.
I think we should adopt that. I like it. I think it sounds cool.
And I'd go home through the garage later.
Doesn't sound cool when you say it, but
Garage. Garage.
I was going to say, that's the way we say it. You're just basically,
Saying it the way we say it.
with some type of weird accent.
Garage.
That's the way we say it.
Yeah.
It's garage.
Garage. We got to put a little Katharine Hepburn into it.
All right, Gibbs. So we've talked about, 6 murders.
We have.
There are 8 in total. So we have 2 more victims to discuss.
If our math is correct.
That's true. It's not always correct.
Yeah.
So Frances Brown, she was born on January 3rd, 1943 in Glasgow, Scotland.
Scotland.
She was a business girl, and again, had a bunch of other names. I mean, Frances Brown wasn't even her real name. Her real name was Margaret McGowan, but she went by Frances Brown. She also went by Frances Quinn, Ann Sutherland, Donna Sutherland, Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah.
No, she didn't go by that. Susan Edwards, Nuala Rowlands. She really had a lot of aliases.
Yeah. Just wanted to use that AKA.
But what I thought was really strange about Frances is that normally in the research, she's listed as Frances Brown, but that's not her real name. Her real name is Margaret McGowan. Frances was working the streets on August 23rd, 1964, and this was the last night she was seen when she got into a client's car and drove off. She was found dead on November 25th, 1964, in a parked Ford Zephyr on Horton Street in Kensington. She was 23 years old. She was strangled to death. They listed her cause of death as asphyxiation by strangulation. Like the others, Frances was short in height. She had a tooth missing. And then the last victim was Bridget O'Hara, born March 2nd, 1937 in Dublin, Ireland. Bridget went missing on January 11th, 1965. She was 28 years old. Bridget was small, 5'2". I'm not sure, Gibbs, if any of these victims were taller than 5'2".
Doesn't seem like it.
One I know for sure was only 5 foot. That means something, right? That's a type. You and I, when we do true crime all the time, a lot of the time when we're talking about serial killers, we're talking about their type. To me, that is a type. She was found on February 16th, 1965, near a storage shed next to the Heron Trading Estate. Her body also had flecks of paint on it. It was determined that she died by asphyxiation by strangulation, but this paint they traced to an electrical transformer near where she was discovered. Police believe that she had been dead for quite some time, with the killer keeping her body much longer than most of the other victims before placing it near the storage shed. On February 20th, police publicly named a man they believed could help them in their investigation in the London nude murders, the Jack the Stripper case. This man's name was Anthony John Holland. He was 29 years old, and he recently lived at Hammersmith, London. On February 28th, police came out and made an appeal to an unnamed man they believed had some type of vital information to the investigation. But the appeal was accompanied by a pledge that the man's confidence would be respected and his identity kept secret. They even offered to meet this guy anywhere, at any time, even through a third party if necessary.
Really?
As far as I know, neither one of these individuals came forward, but I started to think about the pledge. If this guy was if he turned out to be the killer, you are breaking that man's confidence at some point. You're not going to be able to keep his identity a secret. Mm-mm. I'm assuming the pledge is only valid if you're not the killer, right, and you're providing information that is leading to the killer. So we've talked about all 8 victims, and the murders of these 8 victims would be put into the hands of the chief superintendent, John DeRose of Scotland Yard, and he interviewed many witnesses and suspects. And then in late spring of 65, Scotland Yard got a lead, and the lead came when a sample of paint which perfectly matched that of the paint recovered from several victims' bodies was found beneath a concealed transformer at the rear of a building on the Heron factory estate in Acton. This factory estate faced a paint spraying shop. So they had to be really intrigued by this lead. I mentioned it earlier, these flecks of paint, more than a coincidence, found on a number of the victims. Now they got a match to some paint that they found. The police held a news conference And in this news conference, they made what they knew was a false statement to the public. They stated that they had 20 suspects at first. They whittled that number down to 10 and then ultimately down to 3. Now, even though they lied during the press conference, something interesting happened. The killing stopped. No more killings after this news conference. So you have to wonder, why did they stop? Was the killer all of a sudden scared by this lie that they were down to 3 suspects? Or was it some other reason?
Right.
Police had developed theories about the killings. They believed that each victim was hired as a business girl and then murdered. They also believed that the killer performed some type of sexual act with each victim after their death. Then the killer stored their bodies for some period of time near a paint sprayer before dumping them at the location where they were ultimately discovered. Another thing that investigators discovered was that some of the victims were known to be part of the underground party scene in London. Some of these women were also in some pornographic movies. But the real interesting part was that at least one of the victims had some involvement with the Profumo affair. And this was a British political scandal that started with a sexual relationship in 1961 between John Profumo, the Secretary of State for War, and a 19-year-old model named Christine Keller. The scandal deepened when it came out that Keller was also involved with a Soviet naval attaché. And people were worried that this created a possible security risk. One of the victims, Margaret McGowan, or Frances Brown, had actually given testimony at one of the trials related to this big scandal. It was also discovered that many of the victims knew each other, even outside of their business, as we'll call it. All right, Gibbs, so that takes us through the 8 murders. Now I think we want to dive in, start talking about persons of interest, possible suspects in this case, because there's a number of them. And I think the first person to talk about is a man by the name of Kenneth Archibald, who owned a nightclub and one day just walked into the Notting Hill police station and confessed to killing Irene Lockwood. Kenneth was 57 years old. He was also a caretaker at the Holland Park Lawn Tennis Club. But at the police station, he described in detail how he strangled Lockhart, undressed her, pushed her into the river, and then went home and threw her clothes into his living room fireplace. This is very detailed, Gibbs, to walk into a police station and give this type of detail. He also apparently gave a very accurate description of the clothing that she was wearing that night, her build, and even her accent. On top of that, he accurately told police the exact place where her body was found. It's pretty damning.
It's really damning, you would think.
Unless he got it from the newspaper.
Some source.
Or some other source, which he possibly could have. But I think one of the kickers is that when they were looking through Lockwood's apartment, the police found a card for Kenneth Archibald's club. So there was a lot here to kind of tie him. And he was charged with her murder and actually stood trial for it in June 1964. But at some point, Archibald retracted his confession. He said he was drunk at the time he confessed, and he ended up pleading not guilty. And there really was very little evidence that he physically committed the murder.
Yeah, if they don't, you got to have some physical evidence.
Right, outside of him saying he did it and giving some details, other than that, they really couldn't tie him to the murder. So on June 23rd, 1964, he was found not guilty by a jury and then acquitted by the judge. The next person to talk about was a man named Mungo Ireland. He was a favorite suspect of the police. That's a name you don't hear every day, Mungo. It's very close to that character in Blazing Saddles, Mongo.
Mongo.
So, speaking of Blazing Saddles, not to get off on a side note, have you watched that at any point in recent history?
It's probably been a few years ago.
Okay. That movie is so politically incorrect.
Oh,
it's not even funny.
Sure.
In today's standards, it's something else.
Mel Brooks was
He kind of pushed
man.
it. He kind of pushed the envelope a little bit.
He did,
there.
but he was a genius, man.
Now, Mungo was a security guard, originally from Scotland, and he was pretty well known to the business girls around the area. They knew him as Big John, but he was married. He was in his 40s, and he first hit police radar pretty soon after the Bridget O'Hara murder. And the reason why he hit police radar was because he once worked as a security guard at the plant where police matched the paint found to the paint that was discovered on some of the victims. So after this connection was made and it came out, Ireland got wind of it and he took his own life by carbon monoxide poisoning. And he left his wife a note. It said, "I can't stick it any longer. To save you and the police looking for me, I'll be in the garage." Or the garage.
Garage.
But what's interesting about Mungo Ireland is that research later would place him in Scotland at the time of O'Hara's murder. And over time, Gibbs, he's essentially been eliminated as the killer of these women. So it begs the question, why then would he take his own life after this information comes to light if he didn't have anything to do with it? Maybe it's not connected at all. Maybe he was planning to take his own life
Anyway,
but
or
you have to look at it as very odd.
again,
the timing of
it's
it.
one of those things that kind of a rabbit hole makes you go,
Right. The timing of it is very strange. And the next guy that we're going to talk about, he's interesting as well. It's a guy by the name of Freddie Mills, who's kind of celebrity. He was a British light heavyweight boxing champion and really one of the most beloved British sports figures of his time. Years later, a researcher came across some information that he said proved Freddie was involved in the killing. He also said that Freddie was into warped, sadist type sex and that he loved to inflict pain. There was a freelance reporter that said, it was common knowledge on the street that Freddie killed the nude sex workers. Essentially that he was Jack the Stripper and that this was known to people on the West End.
I mean, people were talking about it, on the streets and stuff.
Yeah, but I think a lot of this story comes from or was originated by a local gangster, guy named Frankie Fraser, who told a policeman that Freddie confessed to Scotland Yard, that he was the killer. But the chief at the time later wrote a book on the murders and never mentioned this at all in his book. So you would think, Gibbs, if a man like Freddie Mills, somewhat of a celebrity, had confessed to the crime and you're writing a book about this, you would know.
You would, yeah.
And you would put it in there.
Sure.
But what really gets interesting about Freddie Mills is that in July of 1965, just a few months after the last body was discovered, he was found slumped in the back of his car in a Soho alleyway. He had been shot in the head and a small caliber rifle was found between his knees. All of his family and friends, including many celebrities, were convinced that Mills had been murdered, but the police ruled his death a suicide. Now, there have been a lot of theories floating out around Freddie Mills. One theory suggests that he was afraid that police were closing in on him for the murders, and he decided to take his own life rather than face trial. It's also been said that he was experiencing dizzy spells and that he suffered from depression for some period of time leading up to this. So again, I don't know it's very similar to what we just talked about with Mungo Ireland. I don't know what you make of that. Is it a coincidence that just a few months after the last body is discovered, this man takes his own life?
Yeah.
Maybe it is.
It could be. But it's always going to throw that question out there.
It is, because maybe he was remorseful, maybe he was depressed over the fact that he had murdered 8 women and he decided he couldn't live with himself any longer. I think you can look at it a couple different ways. We're never going to really know.
No.
A former Metropolitan Police detective was a suspect in the case, in the opinion of some of the detectives that investigated the murders. Some of them thought that there was an unnamed detective involved in these murders. They felt that the officer had access and it would have been easy for him to cover it up. But he's always gone unnamed. Now, the name that most people relate to this unnamed person is Superintendent Tommy Butler, who was on the Metropolitan Police's flying squad. But Butler died in 1970. And it's really just speculation that this is the guy that is the unnamed officer. And I don't know if there's a way to ever prove who it is, who they were talking about.
I always think it's tough, when things come up after the fact, when there's nobody there to, give their side of the story, put some color around it or anything like that. Just to drop a name out there and speculate, it's tough.
Figure, senior detectives that investigated this case in 1964, how many of those people are still alive that could even say who it was that they thought this unnamed person was? And would they even do it if they were still alive? You don't know that.
That's true. You just don't.
Now, another man by the name of Harold Jones has also been thought by some to be this killer, Jack the Stripper. Jones at one time had been convicted of murder when he killed 2 girls in 1921 in the Welsh town of Abertillery.
Pretty good.
I'm not sure, Gibbs, if it's pretty good or not. We'll find out. My Welsh town name knowledge is probably subpar.
Well,
And that's on the high end, subpar. But you do the best you can.
Yeah.
But the thing about Harold Jones, when he killed these 2 girls in 1921, he was only 15 years old. So they couldn't give him the death penalty, but he did receive a life sentence, which is staggering at the young age of 15 years old.
Yeah.
But when you murder 2 girls,
yeah,
you deserve what you get.
Absolutely. You reap what you sow.
But obviously it wasn't a life sentence without the possibility of parole, because he was released after serving 20 years. But think about it. He's only 35 years old. The man's done 20 years in prison. He comes out, he's 35 years old. But starting at 15, that was probably a pretty tough 20 years, I would say.
I would think it would be too.
Not too many 15-year-olds that I've ever known could walk into prison and handle themselves.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know too many early 20-year-olds.
No. Against grown men, grown killers, and thugs. So he was released in 1941. In 1947, he moved near the area where all these murders occurred, the murders that we've been talking about. And I guess why people think he is a viable suspect is that when you look at the details around the 8 murders, apparently they are very similar to the details of how he killed these 2 girls in 1921. So I think that's why people label him as a person of interest, as a possible suspect, as maybe the killer. And one investigator found out that Harold Jones went by the name of Harry Stevens from 1947 to 1962.
So his older years, right? His 30s, 40s.
Yeah, I don't consider that to be
Well, I don't
older
either. I
years.
meant from,
I don't feel like I'm in my older years.
Well, I don't
Come on
either,
now,
and I'm older
man.
than you.
In 1947, our age that we are now, people didn't live to be quite as old as they do today.
No, that's true.
So when you were in your 40s and 50s, I guess that was your older years back then. The lifespan was not quite as long. But the thing about Harold Jones is he disappeared in 1962, kind of fell off the map, and then he resurfaced in 1965. But there's really nothing else to link him, nothing physically to link him to the murders. It really came down to people thinking that the similarities between his murders and the way that these 8 women were murdered were very, very similar. He died in Hammersmith in 1971. The murders have been the subject of some television documentaries. There's been a lot of articles in newspapers and magazines over the years. There's been some books written from many of the people that were involved with the case. And then you talk about Hollywood. There was a crime novel called Goodbye Piccadilly, Farewell Leicester Square, written by Arthur LeBurn in 1969, is loosely based on this case that we've talked about. But the reason we mention Hollywood is because that book was adapted for the Alfred Hitchcock movie Frenzy, made in 1972. The case also inspired another movie called The Fiend, which also came out in 1972, in which a misogynistic serial killer leaves his naked victims all across London. All right, Gibbs. So in wrapping up this case, right, that we've been talking about Jack the Stripper, and then you think about Jack the Ripper, which is obviously where, the play on words where they got the name from, they're somewhat similar in the fact that there's a lot of speculation about who the killer is, much more so in Jack the Ripper case, because number one, it's a much more famous case. There's people out there that have devoted their whole lives to trying to figure out who Jack the Ripper was.
Oh, for sure.
And there are a lot of suspects.
Yeah.
And a lot of speculation about those people. But you can talk about, a lot of unsolved cases, right? The Zodiac. You just get a lot of speculation in these types of cases about who the killer could possibly be. But a lot of times as we wrap up these unsolved murders, we talk about, how likely is it that they would solve this case?
Oh, man. I mean, in the 60s, so if they preserve some of the DNA?
Well, that's the question, and I don't think you and I know the answer. Was there DNA to preserve? The one thing that we mentioned was that some of the victims, they determined that they swallowed sperm. And obviously you can get DNA from that, but were they able to collect any? I don't even know how they figured out, to be honest with you, that they swallowed it. And I'm not sure how they would have collected it.
It's a good question.
But that's the problem with this case. I just couldn't figure out or find anything in the research indicating that they had any type of evidence that could be used in today's world, right, to identify a killer. Now, if they were able to collect sperm, then they would have something. But I'm not sure that they were able to or they did. But that's it. That is the case of the Hammersmith nude murders, Jack the Stripper. Like we said, it's known by a couple of different names.
Yeah.
We got some voicemails, Gibbs.
Oh, we like voicemails.
Hey guys, love the show. You get me on binge listening from the beginning here. You're getting me through bronchitis and pneumonia. I really appreciate it. I'm from the great state of Washington. We got lots of stuff I could give you suggestions on, but we got Bundy, we got Ridgway, we got all kinds of people like that. But got one for you that you might not have heard of for your Unsolved show. A gal named Mandy Stavick, who was killed in Thanksgiving 1989, and just last year, 28 years later, they made an arrest. Might be one you want to follow and check out. And it won't be unsolved, but it might be something interesting too. As it's just getting ready to go through trial. Love the show. Keep your time ticking. Bye.
All right, love that suggestion. We'll have to put that on the list and follow it through the trial, and maybe it would end up being a good TCAT.
Think it might
if it gets solved.
Yeah,
it's great that we can help him through his ailments, Gibbs. You know, we're kind of doctors in that way.
We are
in a roundabout way,
just a about way.
We'll cure whatever ails you.
Hi, Ferg. Hi, Gibbs. I am Samantha, and I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I stumbled upon your podcast a little over a month ago because I was never really into podcasts, and I actually found you after researching the Paul Bernardo case. I wanted more, so I gave you a chance, and hoping that you could make the research more fun than it was just reading articles and slowing down my computer. Since then, I have been listening to True Crime All the Time Unsolved as much as True Crime All the Time. Being from Cleveland, I love that you guys always, I love that you guys always talk about Cleveland today. The one episode, I believe it was the torso killer, you referred to, coming up to the flats today to see your friends, and it's just really cool understanding where you're at. I also love how the Cleveland episodes are all on the True Crime All the Time series instead of the Unsolved series, because that means that we have a kick-ass police force here in Cleveland, so I'm very proud. Also, when you guys mispronounce things and make jokes, I find myself, whether I'm listening in my car or at the gym, I find myself laughing out loud because I feel like a lot of these things you say are a Midwest thing, or maybe even an Ohio thing. The episode at Kemper, you were talking about the corrections facility that he was in, and you made a Laverne and Shirley joke. Before I even heard you guys joke about it, that's where my mind went. And that happens a lot where you read my mind, and I have a lot of people that I'm friends with who are not from here, who are never on the same wavelength. So to hear you guys make these jokes or, just references to pop culture, whatever, I feel a very strong, just like bonding thing with you guys because we're all from the same area, and it makes me feel happy, that we're all raised the same and have the same sense of humor. It makes me comfortable with you guys. So I just wanted to say thanks a lot. Even though I get freaked out if I listen to you guys too late, I'm still looking forward to it each and every day. So thank you. Sam from Cleveland. Bye.
All right. Love that voicemail from Sam.
She's from Cleveland.
She is from Cleveland.
So she's used to murder.
Your phone was dinging through the whole
just once
voicemail, which I'm sure the microphones picked up. Cannot keep Gibby off of his damn phone. No matter what I do.
Hey, Mike Squared. It is Brian from Oregon, a farmer, and started your podcast about a week ago. I work 400-hour months, so I've gone through a good portion. I think I'm on number 75. Love the podcast. And, I noticed you guys say son of a bitch a lot. It cracks me up. Whenever I was 15, my mom and I, we were putting together a bed frame, and she pinched her finger, and she's like, son of a bitch. And I said, hell yes, I am. And she turned around and backhanded the hell out of me. Never said it again. It's the only time I've ever been grounded, but keep up the good work. Thank you.
That kind of reminds me of the story that I told about my mom on the podcast, hitting me in the face with the bag of marshmallows.
You deserved it.
I'm sure I did.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, it's Emily from Chicago again, and I am calling with an interesting name that I came across today. Just the middle name, I'm not going to tell you this person's full name because privacy issues, but his middle name is Cousins, or Cousins, if you speak fluent Gibby. Reminded me of you guys, and always kind of, dissecting different words and how we say them. So, and hope you have a good one. Thanks, bye.
Cousin.
It's well known throughout certain parts of the southern states.
Is that like the Minnesota Viking quarterback Kirk Cousins?
Oh, there you go. See, proof right there.
That's proof. All right. We appreciate all the voicemails. We appreciate everybody listening, telling your friends. We love all that stuff. Love to see the podcast grow. Makes us happy. Doesn't it, Gibbs?
Makes it really happy.
All right. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.